Okay, so without further ado, let's get on with the task. We have this one in front of us here. I'll just read this out for us. You have just read an article in an international travel magazine which contained some information about your town that is incorrect. Write a letter to the editor of the magazine, and in your letter, correct the information in the article. Explain why it is important for the magazine to give correct information, and suggest what the magazine could do about this situation. So, what we want to do with task one, general training, is we, as you know, with all the other writing tasks as well, is we want to produce a plan. And I've mentioned before that with the academic task one, I didn't think it's quite as important to underline or highlight keywords because it's very direct what you want to do. But there's quite a lot more going on in the task language when it comes to the general training module. And because of that, I think it is very important that we underline or highlight keywords in front of us. So can anybody give me some ideas as to what you might think the keywords are here? Yes, travel magazine, absolutely. This is going to, I would even go for the international part as well. This is going to influence the content of the letter very heavily, particularly in some respects. So it's very important we have that down. International travel magazine, which contain information about town. And it says town. Is it any town? What town are we talking about? It's my town, exactly, Milan. So it says your town here, because if it was a town like, I live in a place called Bournemouth, but if the town were, for example, Birmingham, that would be incorrect. I would say, and you've got to kind of put out some language that indicates that you know it's incorrect because it is your town. So it's quite important. Okay, and yes, incorrect. Let's highlight incorrect there as well. Okay, now what about in the bullet points? What else could we have there? Good, correct the info. It's very important that we have a look at these imperative verbs here. What do we need to do? We need to correct it. We need to explain. So correct the information. We need to explain why it is important to give correct information. We could just kind of highlight that. The bullet points here, they're a little bit like task one academic really, in that they're very clear. You don't have to highlight these because it's just kind of self-explanatory, but it can be helpful here. So, and yes, suggest what the magazine could do. So suggest what they could do about the situation. It's arguably you don't even need to highlight all of this stuff in the bullet points, but it can be helpful. Okay. Well, important too, yeah. And let's write that down as well. Okay, now ideally, as I'm reading this out to you, as I'm guiding you through this, it's obviously going to take a bit longer, but ideally just this part should be about 10, 20 seconds. Shouldn't spend any longer than 10 or 20 seconds on this part of the plan. Now, the next thing we want to think about is producing the plan itself. Before we can do that, we need to consider what type of letter it is. And by that, I'm thinking of 2 points. Good. We've got Louis, got Doal there, just kind of putting out there. The tone is very important. And as they pointed out, this is a formal letter. On top of that, though, you can also, it's not essential, but you can also consider what type of letter it is in terms of its purpose. What type of letter do you think this is? If I give you a few words here, it might be a request letter, it might be an offer letter, it might be a reference letter, suggestion, could be a suggestion. There are a couple of things you could, it's not really a request. I wouldn't call this a request. You could say suggest. There is one other type of letter it could be, particularly with the way that it's kind of put across this second point here. I see this a little bit like a complaint, a correction. There are a couple of ways that you could go about this, but you could also see it as a complaint letter. I'm complaining about the information included. It's incorrect. You need to have better editors. You need to have better proofreaders, etc. So you could see it as a complaint letter as well. Just make sure that you're consistent in the way that you write the letter, not just in terms of the tone. It needs to be consistent. It needs to have the formal tone throughout. But if you're going to write a complaint letter, make sure it carries that tone throughout. There aren't four types of letter, Palak. There's actually, I would say there's a pretty much unlimited number of letter types it could be. I talk about this in the course itself, the Task 1 general training course. You can have complaint letters, you can have apology letters, request, suggestion, explanation, job reference, job application. So there's lots of lots of types you can have, but just writing it down can help us to keep centered on the task, you know, to not get distracted, to make sure everything is appropriate and relevant as well. So let's just call this a suggestion letter. But like I say, you can look at it as a complaint letter as well if you like. And then the next thing we do is that we just take each bullet point and we approach them as if they were paragraphs. And you can ignore P1 because P1 is going to be the purpose sentence. It's the first sentence that we write that explains why we're writing. So it's going to be basically, I am writing to suggest, or I am writing to complain, or I am writing to advise, that sort of thing. But P2, so we want to look at that first bullet point, correct the information in the article. Now, if you remember from my Task 1 course, I suggest that we have 2 points that we want to communicate for each paragraph. That way, we won't be stuck for ideas. So now I need some ideas from you guys. What might be the problem in the article? What might be the problem with some information about your town? Think about the type of magazine we're in as well. If it's an international travel magazine, that's the thing as well. That's why we write down those, or we underline those keywords. Could be quite crucial. If you think about the types of articles that are included in travel magazines, it's often things like, you know, particular celebrations, carnivals, events, things like this, traditions as well, customs, located in the center. Oh, it could be about location. It could be about position. 10 places to visit in this particular city, distance from city center, all of this. Yeah, this is these are the types of things that we'll come up with. Let's go with, Manisha's written their main attractions. We'll need to be a bit more specific. I would go with let's go with the distance aspect, just because it is very specific. So distance from, what do you mean though, distance from city center? If we're talking about something, information which is wrong about the town, what are we exactly measuring here? What are we talking about when we say distance? You'll have to probably say distance from somebody else. Good, so something like distance from the airport to the museum, something like that, airport to railway. So distance from airport, let's just say from airport for now. Distance and airport, those 2 words are keywords. And so what would be so if you're correcting the information, you don't just give what is wrong, but you also need to provide what is correct. You need to give the correction. So, I don't know, give me something new. Proximity is a nice word as well. We may be able to put both words within this paragraph. So we'll stick with just the one piece of information for now. We don't want to include more. So we've just talked about the distance. I wouldn't put in tickets as well. I just want somebody to say, let's say that, yeah, exactly. As Milan said there, it said 35, but it's actually only 15, something like that. Quite a sizable difference. In fact, if we said something like 30 instead of 15, we can then use language like it is half as far, or it is twice the distance, or something like that. It gives you an opportunity to use some nice comparative and numerical language as well. So let's just go with that, 30 instead of 15 kilometers, or vice versa, however you like it. Now, paragraph 3, we're explaining why it's important. Why is it important for the magazine to give correct information? Seems like quite an obvious answer, but let's think about it anyway. Again, consider here that this is an international travel magazine. You can kind of stress the point here. Customers would be misled. Good. Now, why is it even more important? Yeah, these tourists, you know, you could probably make the point that they're coming all the way from other countries, and all they want to do is be able to get to the city with correct information. You know, you can stress that point. You can say international tourists would be misled. You know, this is a good it's a good verb to use. You can say they may get lost, etc., etc. But this is kind of addressing the task as completely as you can when you write this down here. Okay, last point. Well, we could add another point here, but let's just move on to P4. What could the magazine do about the situation? Issue a rectified article. Good. Yes. I mean, a very nice use of the word rectify there. I think I would simplify it a bit and just say rectify the mistake to start with. Rectify the mistake. And then, yes, you know, the great thing I'm seeing here is because you've got lots of different ideas that you're giving me, we can put these 2 points down. So we'll start by rectifying the mistake, and then maybe you could say even acknowledge the mistake and then rectify it in next edition. Oh, I think I'm hearing someone's voice here. I think, yeah. Thankna, I just need you to switch off your microphone. I think it's off. Okay, great. Thank you. Right. So there's our plan. Ideally, that should only take 2 minutes. Of course, it's taken us a bit longer, naturally, because, you know, I'm trying to guide you through this, but is my camera on, Gustavo? Is that correct? No? No. Okay. I just saw cameras on from Gustavo. Okay. Oh, okay. Zankna's also got her camera on. Zankna, if you also want to switch your camera off for us as well, it will just help to speed things along. Right. So 2 minutes for the plan, and then ideally we have 18 minutes to go through the actual task itself. Now imagine, usually you're given what to write. It's usually, particularly when it is a formal letter, dear sir or madam, and then we just have the comma. Now make sure that the formatting is correct here. You want to leave a gap, and then you want to start on the, not the next line, but the following line, and then we can begin. So how would we typically begin this kind of letter? What type of sentence do we need here? I am writing to. Good. I would say, just as a general rule, this is very important to do for pretty much every formal letter, semi-formal letter you write. The only one which I would make an exception for is the semi-formal letter, where we sometimes start by just saying, I hope you're well, or how are you, or how are things, that sort of thing. But with a formal letter, always I am writing to. And notice there are no contractions here. We have I am, we don't say I'm. So I am writing to, bring this to your notice that. Milan, that's a nice idea, but you're adding almost like too many words there. We want to change that around a bit. Instead of bring this to your notice that, we want bring to your notice that, or bring, even better, even stronger collocation, I'm writing to bring to your attention. Exactly, that's the stronger collocation here. That's the stronger, you know, it sounds more natural to me than notice. So I'm writing to bring to your attention. I am writing to bring to your kind attention. Almost, I mean, if you wanted to add the kind, I would add it here. I'm writing to kindly bring to your attention. Again, just adds a level of formality here, which is quite nice. So I'm writing to kindly bring to your attention what? Yeah, no problem with two. Don't worry about repetition when it comes to those tiny little words like prepositions and conjunctions and things like that. When we think about repetition, we're more worried about, you know, the longer nouns and whatnot. So I'm writing to kindly bring to your attention, not quite yet, that the information on your article is incorrect. Be careful with the preposition there, Louis. We want in your article, about an error. Right, so I am writing to kindly bring to your attention. What you can do here is go straight to the noun. I am writing to bring this thing to your attention. I'm writing to kindly bring to your attention an issue or a mistake. Let's go with an issue. An issue with an article. Now here is where you get the opportunity to use a relative clause. An issue with an article which was published. Notice here as well the grammar that we're using. We're moving to the past tense and we're using the passive voice as well. So which was published in your recent what? What are we looking for here? Edition. Good. Or even better, maybe in the recent edition of your magazine. Maybe something better like that. Now, what's the missing piece of information from this sentence? What have I not included? A couple of you have already mentioned it. Good. So I've sort of left that out on purpose. So there's quite a lot that you need to include here. You need to include the idea of the article. You need to include the idea of the travel magazine itself. And you need to include the idea of the town. Where could it go? Where would be the best? There are a couple of places. English, as you know, is quite flexible with sentence structure. So there are a couple of places it could go. Where would you think is a good place? Name, latest edition, or month. Personally, I would put it just before the relative clause there. An article, and we can just use the preposition on to mean about. It's an article on the Premier League. It's an article on climate change. It's an article on whatever it is. So it's an article on. Now, does this work? Not really. It sounds a bit informal to just say my town. It's also not precise enough. So if you remember from the Task 1 course, we're thinking about the acronym AREA, A-R-E-A, which is appropriateness, relevance, extension, and accuracy. And so this accuracy, we need that precision. We need something more than this. So we can just say an article on, we might just say the town of, and then where do you want to go? London? We could say, well, is London a town? That one doesn't really work because London is a city. So be careful with the location that you choose as well. I'm going to use just my hometown because I know it's a town rather than a city. I think the actual designation is you must have a cathedral to have a city, but there we are. I'm writing to kindly bring to your attention an issue with an article on the town of Bournemouth, which was published in the recent edition of your magazine. Some of you may be wondering whether we should have a comma here. This is one of those slightly more friendly options where you could actually get away with either. You could make the argument that this is essential to the idea of the article. You're being very specific about that article, or you could argue that it is extraneous and you don't actually have to have it for the for the idea of the article. So you could get away with either here. If it doesn't define the article, then you add a comma. It's a non-defining relative clause. But if you feel like it does define the article, then you remove the comma. You could get away with it in either case here. That's not always going to happen, though. Right, we've spent a while on that. Let's move on to the next paragraph. How can we start this one? Again, be very careful with the way that you begin your paragraphs. Don't worry about getting things wrong. Please have a go. But how you begin a paragraph is quite important. It was mentioned that the article gives, the issue is, yes. So I don't think there's really an appropriate particular, let's say, cohesive device that you could use here. I think you do need to jump straight in, but it is essential that you go straight to the matter at hand, which is, of course, the article, the issue. So you might say something like this: the issue I am referencing. You could, I guess, if you wanted to go super formal, you might use the passive and say the issue being referenced, but I think that's that's overkill, really. I think it is okay to use the personal pronoun here. So the issue I am referencing, and then we can use this nice verb relates, so relates to, and then we include what we're actually talking about. So can we carry on from here? The issue I am referencing relates to what? What's the problem? Again, you may have to add a bit more information. I didn't add loads to the plan. Good. The distance that was mentioned or the distance that was. Could you think of a better verb than mentioned? Mentioned makes me think of a conversation. Oh, you just mentioned it the other day in that conversation that we had. Think of a better verb, maybe beginning with re. Better than referred. Think about the reported. Good, Gustavo. So the issue that the distance that was reported. Can we carry on from here? The issue I am referencing relates to the distance that was reported from where to where. Careful, Gustavo, with your prepositions there. You've got a between and a to. You've mixed up a couple there. What's gone wrong? Good, we got an and. So between and, or from and to. You can use either of those, but make sure not to mix them up. Okay, so reported between the airport and the museum. Now, the airport, that's quite likely. The museum, with the town, it's possible that there will be more than one museum. It's unlikely, particularly with something like a town, that there will be more than one airport. So it's okay to use the definite article here, and that's it. But with the museum, I would wonder whether we need to be a bit more precise. Good, something like that. The art museum. We might even say between the airport and the art museum. Yes, just the art museum is fine. Well, we don't need to give those capital letters, just because we would only do that if we were giving it its full title. That's up to you. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. But if you're just describing it generally, you can just use lowercase. Between the airport and the art museum. Okay, I reckon we could probably end the sentence there. What could come next? We wouldn't add a was inaccurate here. Notice that what we have here is the completed thought of the sentence. So the issue I am referencing, there's your subject. Then you've got the relates to, which is the verb there. And then you've got the completed thought. And then it ends the sentence. So you wouldn't add was after that. It wouldn't make sense grammatically. What we want instead... sorry, and then we've got the that here as well, the distance that was reported. We want a new sentence. Now, could we take advantage of this to start the sentence? I think if you notice the plan here, you can do this one of two ways. You could say the article stated that it was yada yada yada, or you can actually start with the instead of. This is a nice way of mixing up your sentence structure. Consider that as an option. Always be thinking about how you could be a bit more, you can show a little bit more flexibility. Besides doesn't work. Besides is a word that you're trying to use to say as well as. So besides, you could say banana. Just going to give you a silly example. Besides vanilla, I also like strawberry ice cream. Something like that. That's how you would use besides. There is another way to use it as well, but it's not like this. Use instead of, or you use rather than. So instead of 15 kilometers, let's say, and really what we can do here is we can actually use a definite article. We can say instead of the 15, you can use this either in the letters or the numbers, that's fine, the 15 kilometers. And the reason I'm using the definite article here is because I'm being more precise about this exact 15 kilometers stated in the article. Instead of the 15 kilometers stated in the article, what punctuation comes now? Good. Very important that you have this comma here. It comes at the end of that clause. So instead of the 15 kilometers stated in the article, what's next? Give me a good adjective to mean, I don't want to say it. The what distance? Original, that's not quite what we're after. Actual would be better. The correct distance, the actual distance. We'll go with the actual. The actual distance between these 2 points, let's go with, is 30 kilometers. Yes, I said that, didn't I? I said that we could use twice. How could we use twice here? The actual distance between these 2 points is twice. Yeah, we could just put that in. Twice as long, but also we say twice as long, so the distance is twice as long rather than twice as much. And then you can add the preposition. Which preposition do you think we should add here? Just to be specific. Not two. Any other ideas? Not quite. Closer with the at. It's actually at. It is twice as long at 30 kilometers. Think about when we are, I don't know if you've been doing much task one academic, but then when we come to actually report the actual figure, we come to the end of a clause, for example, and then we need to report the figure itself, we often say at and then the number. So, you know, sales of Renault were twice as high as those of Volkswagen at 300,000 per year, something like that. Might sound a bit wrong. Have a look. What I would recommend, Palak, is have a look at some articles on graphs, basic, what am I thinking of? Currency exchange articles, and that will give you a good idea of how often the preposition at appears in this sort of context. Let me just read this out. Instead of the 15 kilometers stated in the article, the actual distance between these 2 points is twice as long at 30 kilometers. If you're unsure, you could just, if you're unsure about the at yourself and you're not confident about putting that in, you may be able to reword it and say something like the actual distance between these 2 points is 30 kilometers, and then use the relative clause, which is twice as long. That's also okay. As long as, twice as long as, no, because so Milan, when you write as long as, you're saying it's the same. You would say, for example, my shoe is as long as my right shoe is as long as my left shoe. I'm terrible with coming up with examples, but you can see here the as long as means the same. It is as long as A is as long as B. Okay, great. Okay, let's move on to the next paragraph. That's great. That sort of length is what you want when it comes to a paragraph for the letter, by the way. Next one, we are looking at explaining why it's important for the magazine to give correct information. This gives you a good opportunity to use conditional grammar. I'm just going to point that out to you now. Good. Okay, let's go with that. So the main problem with. Carry on, see if we can go from here. And just keep in the back of your mind how we might be able to use conditional grammar, but it might not come until the next sentence. Okay, got a bit of radio silence here, so I might try and help out. This is that it can mislead the tourists. The original distance mentioned edition is presented information. The main problem with the content misleads the tourist. You could go with stuff like this. This is okay. I'm actually going to reword this just a little bit, just to make it a little bit more advanced, to give you a little bit more help here. I would change problem as a noun, quite a simple word, right? We can turn it into something a little bit more advanced by turning it into an adjective. So we could say something like, the reason this is so... Now, what is the adjective of problem? I might even say one reason. I don't want to suggest. Problematic. So just with a little tweak, a tiny little tweak, you're kind of just jumping through the bands a little bit. So one reason this is so problematic is that it is likely to be... Always try to avoid generalizations, just like in tasks 2 as well. It is likely to... do you know what? Now that we've got the verb there, mislead, or in the past there, misled, I've realized that it's not actually correct. This verb doesn't actually work. And the reason for that is because if you were to mislead someone, it would be intentional. There's an element of intention. The magazine is not trying to get people to go the wrong way. It's an accident. So we could just say it is likely to cause careful. Yes. So as Milan's put out there, we want confusion. It's an uncountable noun on the whole. There are some exceptions, but confusion is usually an uncountable noun. It's likely to cause confusion for who? Any particular tourists? For the international tourists. Now, again, notice what I've done here. I've added a definite article. So the reason that I'm doing that is because I want to, again, add a bit more precision. Now, notice as well that I'm going to use another relative clause. The international tourists who have just, and again, notice what I'm doing here. I'm adding a bit more grammatical variety. I'm adding the present perfect, who have just arrived where? At the airport. You might even say something like cause confusion for the international tourists who have just arrived at the airport, and then you add some of whom have been on maybe something like long, what do we call it when the flight is very long? Long haul, good spelling there as well. Long haul flights. So this just stresses the point that they're going to be exhausted. They want to be able to just get to where they need to go. They don't need to have another element of difficulty added to things. Okay, now, a moment ago, I talked about how this was an opportunity to add a conditional sentence. I'm going to open it up for you and see if you can kind of follow it on for me. So if, let's say, if these tourists, here, you can see the opportunity that's presented to you for a conditional sentence. What can I write here? If these tourists had read. Now I wonder, can we use the past perfect here? Are we thinking third conditional? If these tourists had read, I suppose it's an article in the past. If these tourists were to read, yeah, let's go with the had read. It does make sense. There's an element of uncertainty for sure, but it's true that it's possible that this could have happened in the past. So we can use that. So if these tourists had read your article, and when I say your article, I'm referring to the editor here, his article, he may not have written it, but it's in his magazine. If these tourists have read your article, now this is the tricky bit. What comes next? This is the tricky grammar. So that's the hard part. Is it will? Is it would? Is it something else? So if these tourists had read your article, notice we need to go to just they again. So they would, well, the better here, they might have. Again, we want to avoid the generalization. We can say might have. But essentially, you want the would. If you are to use a will or would, it's would plus the have plus the past participle. So they might have found themselves, let's say found themselves, or just let's say they might have become lost. I'll use sort of a French expression there, but we use it a lot in English as well, just en route. So en route to suggest on the journey from the airport to the museum. So if these tourists had read your article, they might have become lost en route. The problem with this sentence is only that it suggests that this never happened. And it might have happened. So maybe we need to change this a little bit and say some of these tourists may, this is a nice expression, may well, as in it's very likely, may well have read your article. And in this case, they might have become lost en route. Maybe something like that. It's not perfect. Now that I'm reading it back, maybe we were trying to crowbar in the conditional. Maybe that's not ideal here. I think I was more trying to use it as an opportunity to give you a chance to practice the grammar. But never mind. Just got to read some of these messages. End up getting lost. Referring and referencing. Pretty much the same. Pretty much the same. verb. There are some situations where you would use one and not the other, but they're pretty, yeah, they're usually interchangeable. I would probably have a look after the lesson, Tim Wang, just at some example sentences that include them. You might be able to find a context dictionary, or the Longman's dictionary is quite good for that. Anyway, let's move on to the fourth paragraph here, so where we need to say what they could do about this situation. What's a good way we could start this paragraph? And there are some quite useful expressions we could use here. It would be great if, that sounds to me a little bit semi-formal. We need to keep it a little bit more formal than that, a little bit more, a little bit drier, let's say. What's this expression? IO2, IoT, in order to. I mean, you can tell just looking at that, it sounds very formal. We can use it in a semi-formal setting as well, sometimes in an informal setting, but there's no denying that it has a formal sound to it, so that's useful. So in order to, what are we trying to do here? Avoid, correct, yeah. We can use this as a verb. So in order to correct the issue, in fact, I'm going to borrow a verb from over here. In order to rectify the issue, and then we add that comma, and now we suggest what the magazine could do. Now, what are we suggesting that they do? Now, we might say, I would, and then what's a good verb? Think about the type of letter it is. Suggest, good. So that's where that's coming useful. You could also say recommend. Yeah, they're both great. So in order to rectify the issue, I would suggest. Now, here is where we have a good opportunity to use the subjunctive, which is not a common form in English, but we do use it in formal letters when we're talking about wishes, recommendations, regrets, things like that. And what we do, I wonder if you can fill the gap for me here. I'm going to use Milan's suggestion, where I would suggest article. Okay, yeah. So here, there are going to be, that's a verb. It's a basic verb. And that actually, that always comes off to suggest. I would suggest that you do this. I would suggest that I do that. But this, it's a to be verb. What form should the to be verb be in when we're in the subjunctive mood? Sorry, I'm kind of making this a bit more good. Although almost perfect, Milan, but what you need to do is drop the to. So you're basically just saying be. I know that looks very strange, and that it does look strange. It doesn't come up very often in English, but particularly for formal letters, and particularly for talking about, as I said, talking about suggestions, talking about wishes, desires, regrets. Very few cases you can use, and it's great to use this subjunctive mood. So I would suggest that the article be printed, or as someone said there, reprinted, I think, with the right information. Edited, yes. I mean, once the article is out there, you can't do anything about it. It's in people's hands. That's why we're saying here reprinted with the right information. So reprinted with the right information in your next edition. Okay, now let's have a look. We're at 148. And of course, we probably make it a little bit longer with our signing off, but I want to add one more sentence anyway. And that last sentence is because I want the editor to add a note. I wonder if you can think of a good way of putting it, just to bring readers' attention to the mistake in the next edition. The first thing is you're adding another point. What cohesive device can we use to add another point? Furthermore, additionally, So the point that I want to talk about, the point that I want to include is that they should, kind of what I've written here, acknowledge the mistake. I want them to point towards it so that the future readers realize the mistake from the previous edition. How can I write that? It's not really, I mean, you could do that, Milan. You could talk about why you're making that suggestion. But yes, as Gustavo's put there, I want something more like that. I also recommend. Now notice what I did here. I would suggest. Do the same thing with recommend. I would also recommend. Also, Palak, notice you've got there, I would suggest to recheck. Think about verb patterns, very important. Suggest does not follow on with a to plus a verb. It's I would suggest and then a verb in the ing. I would suggest rechecking a few times. So verbs like suggest and recommend are a bit tricky when it comes to verb patterns, so I'd recommend doing a bit of practice. Notice that there, I would recommend doing a bit of practice. Again, you've got the verb in the ing. So furthermore, I would also recommend, so recommend to validate. Think about the verb pattern. That's just a question to Pradeep there. I would recommend to validate. Is it to validate or is it a different verb pattern? Validating, exactly as Milan's put there. So we want recommend plus verb in the ing. So let me just have a look through these ideas. Recommend highlighting. I would recommend, yes, let's go highlighting the mistake or drawing attention to. Notice that you can say draw attention to and you can say bring attention to. And by using both verbs in your letter, you may argue it's repetitive, but actually you're showing you've got a range of collocations for different words. So I would recommend, excuse me, that's my mistake, drawing attention to the mistake in the, and now it's called, so often in magazines you've got the front page, the very first page after the advert that's on the in cover is from the editor often, and he's just writing about what's happened over the past months, and often they include these errors that have been made. In fact, have we got the word error in here? I don't think we have. And now for lexical resource purposes, let's add it in. So I would recommend drawing attention to the error in the editor's note of this. I don't want to repeat addition again, not because I'm worried about the repetition, but I don't like it being the same word at the end of each sentence, addition, addition. I would also recommend drawing attention to the error in the editor's note of this next. Printing, we can say printing, that would be fine. Okay, now that brings us to what I am comfortable with to be the end, which is 166 words, which is great. So I think with the general training, the problem tends to be trying to reach 150, whereas with the academic, it tends to be trying to keep the word count down, but sort of opposite. So make sure that you've got enough words there. If you're ever unsure, you can always try and fluff it up with the ending. What could we finish with? Oh, I didn't realize that we had all these messages down here. Editor's note. So in the consecutive magazine in the upcoming. Yeah, best regards. I prefer for semi-formal letters. I hope you will consider my request is great. I like that. Definitely very good to just buffer the ending there. Not vital, but definitely if you're worried about the word count, it's good to keep it up. Should it be yours faithfully or yours sincerely? Why is it yours faithfully? You're correct. Be careful, Louis, that you make sure it's yours good, yeah. But why is it faithfully? Why not sincerely? There's no name in the beginning. Exactly, Milan. Good. So yours faithfully. Lots of native speakers actually get things wrong about this signing off. You know, some of them will add an apostrophe, absolutely not appropriate. Some of them will drop the S, again, not appropriate. Just a yours faithfully, comma, and then, you know, you can add your name. You could also add a Mr. and then your surname as well. It's whatever you want to add here. You can add both. You know, whatever you want to include, and that's fine. So that's pretty decent for a letter. I think that's quite strong actually. We got some good ideas there. We had a good opportunity to practice things like relative clauses. We had the subjunctive mood there. We looked at the conditional sentences, even though maybe they weren't the best to use. I 9 plus Ban Palak. I I'd like to say yes because I've been the one helping you to write it. There are a couple of issues with it. I think we tried to shoehorn in this particular sentence, which didn't really help so much. It's not wrong. Grammatically, it's perfect. And actually, it's better since we edited it. It's just that I think I was trying to push for that conditional and it didn't work as well. Right, we have 12 minutes. Okay, guys. So I am going to at least get us to maybe open up this letter here. If you're happy to carry on, just for the next few minutes, we can actually just maybe get started on this one. And if we don't finish it, well, that's okay. I'll potentially finish it and put it in an announcement. So you need a translation of a document into a different language, and you have a friend who speaks that language. Write a letter to your friend. In your letter, explain what the document is and why you need a translation. Explain why this is urgent and important for you, and ask your friend when he or she will be able to help you. So what type of letter do we have here? It's a request and it's an informal letter, absolutely. Both of those things are correct. So request and informal. We'll jump straight in. What are the key words? Of course, it's translation of a document. And I mean, you don't really even need different language because we know it's a different language because it's translation. But of course, you can write that if you want. A friend who speaks that language. Again, quite important. You know, you could be asking a friend who has a friend, but no, it's a friend who speaks that language. We're writing a letter to the friend. And then, as I said, those bullet points, it's not totally vital for you to put down those keywords because it's all self-explanatory within there. So because of the time, I'm going to just skip that for now. And we'll go straight into thinking about the plan. What is the document? What do you think? So we'll come up with the document first and then the reason. So Nidhi, that's a good idea for the reason, but let's first of all think about the document. Immigration document, yeah. I mean, you might suggest that might not be specific enough, but I think that's actually fine. I think that's fine. If you were to give a specific number like an A724, whatever it is, then the examiner's not going to know what it is anyway. So an immigration document is fine. Okay, immigration document, and again, we'll use Nidhi's reason because are we traveling to a different country or can we give a more specific verb? We're going to stick with the immigration document. Moving, exactly. Dawal's got the right idea there. It's not enough to say traveling, because if we're immigrating, then we're talking about moving countries. So moving to a new country. Okay, why is it urgent? And why is it important? Think about words that you could use here, special nouns. Good, that's exactly what I was thinking, Louis. A deadline. There is a deadline approaching. Oh, great. So Dawal's given me the verb that I wanted and Louis gave me the noun. So a deadline approaching. And why is it important? We've got why it's urgent. Why is it important? Again, it sounds quite obvious when I ask the question, but how could you put it? You might just say something like, you cannot proceed without it. You can't emigrate without it. So something like that. It just gives you the opportunity to write something down so you're not stuck for ideas later. So cannot proceed without, something like that. Okay. And then ask your friend when, I think I've added an and in here unnecessarily, ask your friend when he or she will be able to help you. I don't even know how you plan for that paragraph because your plan is you're just asking, aren't you? Please, can you help me? I suppose what you could do is you might be able to say, can you help me when? As in what day? Maybe you can give an expression. So it's not okay to say Monday, maybe the day after tomorrow. Oh, but on a letter, that's unlikely. maybe the middle of the week. Just try to find expressions that are not very basic, very kind of A1 level English. Do you have some time in the week? Something like that is a very native way of speaking. And the idea with the at the coming weekend, something like that also would be great. But the idea with the informal letters is try when you're writing to imagine what a native speaker would say in a conversation with a friend, not what they would write, but how they would talk, and then put those words into the letter. That's we're trying to simulate that way of speaking in written form. Yeah, also sometime in the week, as soon as possible is good. The tricky thing with the as soon as possible is it almost sounds formal because it sounds a little bit too, I hesitate to say it, but a bit rude. And I don't know if that's my Britishness talking, but you're asking for a favor from someone. They don't have to help you. So if you're saying as soon as possible, it sounds a bit pushy, let's say. So sometime in the week, you might say something like, the sooner the better. That's a little bit less, forward, I would say. Something like that. The sooner the better. You'd be doing me a huge favor if you could make it even sooner. Something like that. Okay, let's get started here. Again, they're going to say here just dear, and then they're going to give you the 3 dots. So I'm just going to go with like Tom here. So dear Tom. Now, how do we start an informal letter? Good. I'm just writing to. It's been, yeah, I would personally like to see, a very basic, and don't worry that this seems formulaic. Don't worry that it seems a bit robotic. It is kind of robotic, but it's what we do when we write. We write, I hope you're well. You can also, yeah, you can drop the personal pronoun if you like and use that a little bit of omission. You can say, hope you're well. Dear Tom, I hope you're well. But just notice here, you can see in Palak's answer, you've got the you are, but Ngok there has got um, the contraction, so the U and the R combined with the apostrophe. That's what we want to find when we have an informal letter. But just make sure you try to use contractions throughout now as we're in an informal letter. I hope you're well. Then I would go on to I'm just writing to. So I'm just writing to what? You can start with just hope as well. Yeah, that's fine, Milan. I'm just writing to ask for a favor. You might, yes, that's good, but you might. I mean, if it were me, I would try to be a little bit more expressive. I'd like to try to be a little bit more grateful in the way that I'm writing. Yeah, like I'm just writing to ask. I'm just writing to ask for a huge favor, and then something like, if you wouldn't mind helping me out. Something like that. Notice as well, what this gives you the option to do is you've got that conditional grammar as well. If you wouldn't mind helping me out, I'm just writing to ask for a huge favor. Something like that is also quite good. Okay, now we can just move on into. Actually, no, what the document is. Let's be more specific. I'm just writing to a huge favor as I need a document translated into, and then we'll, I don't know, give the language, as I need a document translated into German, because that's actually not part of the bullet point there. In the bullet point, we're saying what the document is and why you need it, so we can actually include that in the top part. So I'm just writing to ask for a huge favor as I need a document translated into German. Now, how can we start the next paragraph? Good, something like that. I like that. This sort of language here, as you might be aware or as you are aware, this is perfect because it suggests a shared knowledge, and it's a shared knowledge because you are friends. So things like that are really useful. Again, try to take the opportunity to use the contractions as you're aware, and then the I'm hoping to move to Germany in within the next few months. Okay, notice this kind of informal language, I'm hoping to move to Germany within the next few months. and what? Could be the following week, whatever you feel like putting here. And I require, so a word like require is more of a formal verb. Although it sounds basic, the verb need is more appropriate when it comes to us in an informal letter. So you need to find opportunities to show your lexical skills elsewhere. It doesn't just have to be in the complexity of the single words. And I'd be grateful if you could help me with the translation of, again, yeah, I'd be grateful if you could. Sounds quite, quite stuffy a little bit. Um, I'd be, well, first of all, I'm just going to say why I need it. So, as you're aware, I'm hoping to move to Germany within the next few months. And as part of the immigration process, because remember, we don't want to say, I'd be grateful if you could translate. We've already asked for the translation. We just want to talk about what the document is and why you need it. So, and as part of the immigration process, I need to have and this is where I think we need to be a bit more specific here. Maybe like I need to have like a job certificate. Maybe it's a particular degree that you need translated, like an educational qualification. Let's say I need to have my let's say bachelor's degree translated, something like that. So as you're aware, I'm hoping to move to Germany within the next few months, and as part of the immigration process, I need to have my bachelor's degree translated. Um, and then, okay, here is where I'm going to add this informal language. This is where you come in. Although maybe that's a little bit forward as well. You're already kind of saying they're going to do it for you, but this is an expression to mean this is where you can help me. This is where, you might say, this is where I hope you come in. You just have the I hope there. This is where I hope you come in. And then we move on to why it's so urgent. Okay, again, this Pradeep, this is where your support is required. This is where your support is needed. It's okay. It just sounds quite semi-formal. Again, I'm imagining here this is a very close friend. So you're trying to be a little bit lighter with the language. It sounds quite serious when this support is required. It has this, that sounds, with that passive voice, it sounds quite stuffy. It's a bit drier. So anyway, how are we going to start here? We'll try and get this paragraph done. Good, I like that. Since the deadline is approaching, and I cannot proceed, good. Okay, I can't tell you why this is, but I cannot proceed, for some reason sounds a bit formal as well. I'm going to say, and I won't be able to. Just being able to add that contraction in there helps. And I won't be able to proceed without it. Again, remember, we're just talking about why it's important for you here, rather than asking for the translation. So since the deadline is approaching, I won't be able to proceed without it. What's another word for important? It's crucial, it's vital, it's necessary. I would go stronger than necessary. Let's go with crucial. It's crucial that I get this document translated. Can you give me, get this document translated until next week? I think, Gustavo, you've made a very common error there, very understandable, confusing between until and what's the other one? What do people often give? By. By and until are often confused with one another. You would say, I have until next week, or I must get it done by next week. So it's crucial that I get this document translated by next week. And then again, use some nice native speaker like language here. Friday at the latest. Just at the latest, that nice kind of expression there. The sooner the better, I'm hoping, will come in the next paragraph. So since the deadline is approaching next week, now the one thing I would change here is that I would again try to inject your own personality into it a bit, kind of again try to make the writing a little bit lighter. And I would maybe talk about how it's your fault that you've left it so late. I'm so sorry that I've left it so late, but you know what I'm like, something like that. You might even add that here. So I'm so sorry that I've left it so late, but you know what I'm like. You know, it's true to form for me, that sort of thing. It's just, again, because these paragraphs are a little bit shorter as well. I'm just trying to bulk up the response. Okay, and next one. So we're now looking at asking your friend when she'll be able to help you, or he'll be able to help you in this case. Could you have it done? See, this is again, Gustavo, good idea. It's really difficult to kind of get a really good grasp on the right tone here. Could you have it done? Sounds to me like my manager is talking to me and he's given me a deadline for the document he wants translated. With a friend, the would you mind sounds better that Manisha's put there. As I say, it's very difficult to get a grasp on this, but could you make some time is also quite good. Now, here's a really nice expression when you're making a request in an informal letter. If it's not too much trouble. Notice as well, you get to use an if, which is always useful. And then you can add the would you mind, could you please, that sort of thing. So if it's not too much trouble, could you make some time in the week for me when we could sit down and, let's say, go through this document together, something like that. Now, I also want to include that, you know, time is of the essence. I'm not going to write time is of the essence, that which really just means I need to have it as soon as possible. Over a coffee could be quite this. Yeah, okay, make some time in the week for me. We sit down and go through this document together. And you might even, it's not part of it. We've just got when. Although maybe that's the word that I missed. Maybe I didn't add the where. I can't remember. Can't remember exactly what the task was, but there could have been a where in there as well. So we might need to write a coffee, you know, cafe maybe potentially in there as well. So we might say we could meet at, let's say, Costa Coffee, wherever you want to go. We can meet at Costa Coffee or via Zoom. Yes, also wherever you want to be there. We can meet at Costa Coffee. And I'll what? I'm kind of stuck myself here. It's not too much trouble. Could you make some time in the week for me? We can sit down and go through this document together. We can meet at Costa Coffee. And of course, there we go. And of course, the drinks are, what's the expression here? Where you're saying that you're going to, yes, well done, everybody. Nice. And again, that's very informal, which is what we want to see on me. So we can meet at Costa Coffee, and of course the drinks are on me. I'm going to come back. That's how I want to end this paragraph. It's not what I want to put in the middle, but I do want to stress the point about the sooner the better. So you might just say, if you could meet me even sooner, all the better. And then that exclamation mark. Do notice the punctuation here. So the exclamation marks really should only appear in an informal letter. They shouldn't appear in a formal letter. Maybe in some very exceptional circumstances, they might appear in a semi-formal letter, but typically just can use them in the informal letter. And they're just adding, again, that sense of lightness, you know, just because it's quite a serious letter. So you can either write, say, the sooner the better. That's that typical the comparative, the comparative. This isn't really the same. This is saying, this is an expression alone. All the better is an expression alone. It's not mixed with another comparative. We're just saying that it's even, that's an even better thing. That's all that means. But it exists alone as an expression. It's not dependent on another comparative. So I might say, I'm meeting, you know, we're meeting on Wednesday, but if we could meet on Friday, all the better. It kind of just means even better, really. But again, informal, again, shows a bit more command over the language, something like that. We can meet across the and we can sit down. Yeah, that's a nice idea, Tim. When you don't need a question mark, Oh, no, you do. No, you're absolutely right. I thought I'd written that in a different way, but you're right. You've got the could you make some time in the week for me? That's a very good observation. Yes. And a question mark there is very important. Good catch. Right, now let's have a look at the word count. Obviously, we've gone through this one quite a bit faster than the other one, but you can see we're at 153 words for the actual content. Let's close it off. How would we close off the letter? Yeah, I mean, of course, as Milad says, you can just write a best, Matt. This is how I usually sign off all of my letters, whoever I'm talking to a lot of the time. But I would also, because it's a big favor here, you might add a can't wait to see, but I would add a thank you so much, something like that, or thanks so much for your help. And then this is something we often say, oh, I owe you one. Or maybe in this case, even better, because it's future. And again, you get to show your your grammatical range here. You show your ability with future forms. I'll owe you one. Thanks in advance as well is great. Thanks in advance for your help. Thanks so much for your help. Whatever you prefer there. I'll owe you one. And then you can add with the best, Matt. Thanks, Matt. Whatever you feel is appropriate here. And then that'll be fine. And I think the word count will, as we've seen, will be okay. So that class lasted a bit longer than usual, but not too bad, within 10 minutes of 3 o'clock. Hopefully I haven't kept you guys for too long. As I said, this lecture will be being uploaded to the Task 1 General Training course if you ever want to watch it again. I can't strongly say that this again would be a band 9. I was kind of rushing this one a little bit, but it's a very high level response with perfect grammar as well and lots of nice vocabulary. I can't see why it wouldn't score at the top levels. Anyway, hopefully you guys have found that one useful. Now the next class is going to be, I think, on the 3rd of November, so it's like a 5-week break now. Hopefully then things will be a little bit more settled for me. I think part of the reason that it hasn't been brilliant was because I'm very stressed at the moment with moving flat. It's going very badly, but hopefully it will be all settled by then. Regarding paragraph time, ideally you want to spend about 3 or 4 minutes on each paragraph, and that should give you enough time to go back and check for errors and for planning. Thanks, Tim Wang. Appreciate that. All right, I'll let you guys go. Have a brilliant October, and I shall see you in November.